Welcome to another Beyond Tells breakdown. This player is from our second Beyond Tells study, the largest behavioral study ever conducted on poker players. So what I'm going to be doing here is just going over the first three hands that he plays and sort of showing you how the information or behavioral information builds from hand to hand so that we can make a really effective read later. I'm just going to be sort of going over the video. So let's go. All right, starts off with a big, genuine laugh and smile. Mood's always something very important to pay attention to. Just because how a player's mood shifts throughout a session will often open up certain things. So some players may not have any behavioral leaks, maybe relatively solid. All of a sudden they get frustrated or they're running really hot and you start to see they let their concealment down, they let their guard down, so things open up. You'll hear a lot of like really experienced live players talk about this in the area of like, maybe they'll say the feel of the table has changed. A lot of what they're processing is just the change in mood. All right, so quick card check. And now we have a hesitation of like, what should I do? How much should I do? And he raises to 15 and recheck. So for like 99.9% of the population, when we see that string of behavior, I talk about this extensively in the Beyond Tells training link below. When we see that string of behavior where a player has a hesitation, then all of a sudden checks their cards, and immediately after, let's say 6 or 7 seconds after, rechecks their cards, it's almost guaranteed to be what they consider to be marginal. So from an exclusion perspective, we never think this player has a hand like Queens plus or Ace Jack suited plus. Now, I tend to believe that that movement is more indicative of a player who is going to be more recreational. The reason why I say that is, most higher level players are going to be able to process, all right, small blind, big blind, what's the action relatively quickly. He hesitated, had some issues there. But yeah, that behavior is definitely marginal. And while there are variations from player to player, there are certain themes that are just everywhere, and the reason why they're everywhere is because they have to deal with cognition and not emotion. So most players think poker tells are about emotion. They're not. They're about cognition. We're getting an insight into how a player is thinking about a hand based on their execution and the way they're looking around the table and a bunch of other factors. So on this board, 10-5-9, he instantly looks at it and bets out. There is no reason to suspect, like I said, if we're saying that he's marginal, a lot of marginal hands do fairly well here. So I don't think it makes any sense. It makes perfect sense that he's betting. And we get a fold, okay? So right there off that first hand that we observed this player, he's a great candidate to pay attention to. That's the first thing you should sort of understand about that. Any variation in hand movement, we're gaining insights. He's easy to pay attention to, and we should be focusing our attention and efforts on him. All right, a check and what we call a cavalier, like why not call, just he calls under a gun in a 6-max game and then starts to now play with his chips in his right hand, and the call is what it is. He's probably marginal here, obviously, and then just a quick check. Quick check. It's just give up behavior. Bet and he'll fold. All right, we get to see that he has Jack 10 there, a little bit of a cheat. Interesting that he would do that with that hand. But this is the hand that I specifically want to talk about and where more of the sort of value is. So let's watch this carefully. All right, on his phone, talking to someone to his right. Phone usage is really hard to predict with a lot of players. There are some subtle things, but nothing right now that I'm going to talk about. Also, you have to understand, when I make these freaking videos, I'm trying to selectively discuss the things that I think are relevant and important. I could speak about this hand for 10 days right now. I mean, there's so much discussion about what's noise, what's not noise, player tendencies and trends, what you see at different levels, different stakes. So that's why I try to hold back so the video is not 80 hours long. All right, so reflection of what it is, checks his cards, scratches his head a little bit, looks down, All right, so the best thing to sort of way to describe this behavior is he looks like he's thinking about what to do. He seems to be going back and forth between a call or a raise. I don't think it's a call or a fold. So it's a hand that he's trying to think about call or raise, which for this player, we're not 100% sure what that hand might be. It might take some time to actually understand that and how he's approaching and thinking about the game. Opponent bets. You don't see that much reaction right now. Probably thinking about what to do. Any calls? Ace Jack is it's potentially a hand that he might be thought about raising but decided to call. This is where it gets weird, right? So like when we're trying to assess where players at, I mean, I can't talk about this in this video because it's just so robust, but we're also trying to understand a player's level, understand how a player's thinking about a hand, how they're viewing their ranges, how they're capping their ranges. All of that's being displayed via behavior. So when a player's in a spot where they should be, I don't want to say should, but they could be 3-betting a certain percentage of hands or whatever, and you see them like kind of go back and forth and like, I'm not 100% sure, and they look really indecisive, it's probably the type of player that hasn't done a ton of work on 3-bet ranges or hasn't done a ton of work on understanding board textures and stuff like that, because they're in the moment trying to figure out what they're doing. You can play with some other like more foundationally sound players that have defaults all the time. Like they know what they're doing in pre-flop spots, and just the way players contemplate pre-flop is really an insight into also where their game is actually at. And a lot of players completely miss that. So you can range players more effectively. You can understand how to exploit players more effectively just by paying attention to that information. And I really get this because I coach poker for so long. So I sort of be able to watch a player play and understand like where are their leaks and what are they struggling with. All right, so he's looking at his opponent, not much here, checks back. And now he displays an open display of frustration, and that was before the $40 bet. So when the 10 of spades hits, the guy bets 40, and now he continues to, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. Now, what does this mean? So I don't know what the player in the one seat has, but this is what we call an open display of emotionality. Not every poker player is sitting there and like, they're not doing that all the time. Sometimes players are casual, they're interacting, they're going back and forth, and every once in a while they drop their level of regulation. Also, it's not a gigantic spot. $40 bet, you know, it's not huge, it's not for a ton of money. So he's sort of showing that level of facial animation and displays and all that openly for us to interpret. Now, some players, it is what it is. You're not looking for some sort of higher level reversals or anything like that. They just don't regulate. And if they don't regulate, we can take their facial expressions and all that stuff at face value. Now, a little caveat. If all of a sudden you bet 40 and he does all those facial expressions like you just saw, and he makes it 200, he's got the nuts fold. I don't know what he has, but fold. He's got king queen, basically. That's one of the things that we've found over and over again is players will go like, I don't know, and make a big raise. It's like one of the obvious classic dumb tells. But in this, it's not the case. He immediately sees the river and he displays that level of like frustration or confusion. Problem here is if you want him to fold, $40 is definitely not enough. One of the things that you want to do with bet sizing and sort of attacking players' behavioral weakness is you want to take lines and bet in amounts that make the decision easy for them. So if he's really like, oh, that 10's a tough card, it's like, okay, if I'm bluffing, like just over bet pot and just get it an easy fold right there. That's probably what I would be doing with I don't know what I had. Let's say I had air and I want him to fold. There's no way I wouldn't take advantage of this player in that spot, and I would be betting pot or actually over pot, probably like 110, 120%, something like that. But he contemplates, and says like, oh, I've got to make this call, and calls. And let me show you what he has. So he has queens. Now, you can argue the way he played this hand. There's a lot of stuff to say about this, but what I find it most interesting is This seems to be more of a recreational type player that, based on the way that this hand played and based on what we've seen previously, he's not like thinking range on range. He's basically thinking, here's my hand, here's the flop, like where am I at? And he's probably leaning more towards the side of too tight or too afraid, meaning not recognizing or understanding his own value. And he has pre-flop behaviors or pre-flop tells that are giving us off indications of when he's strong, marginal, or weak. And he has in concealments in turn or river spots, he's openly, transparently sort of showing us how he feels about a given interaction. So this is sort of a prime player to pay attention to. You would love to have this player at this table. You would love this player to be playing a lot of hands. And in Beyond Tells, I do like an hour breakdown on this player. But there is just so much damn information when it comes to behavior at the table. I mean, I don't really feel like you can, if you're a semi-intelligent person and you don't even believe the value of tells, and I gave you the video of this guy and I showed you every hand he played, and you carefully paid attention to the differences in the way he treats marginal hands versus strong hands and the difference in intensity. I mean, there's a lot more shit than just this that I'm talking about. And it's sort of so, I'm going to say this over and over again on this channel, like it's just so utterly ridiculous to me that players don't believe behavior has value. It's just right there. Like the narrative is so clear. It's so interesting. And if you're not paying attention to players in live games, it's just a major disadvantage in today's games. And I've played with some really high level players that have tons of stuff that they give off. And I've played with some really basic players that have tons of stuff to give off. Everybody's giving off information. If I don't regulate, I give off information. I do certain things when I'm marginal. Behavior is a very, very important aspect of this game, and it's been ignored for way too long. So I'm doing these videos to motivate you, to have you open your eyes to the world of information that's available if you just open and open your eyes. And sometimes players sit there and they're like literally like this. The whole time they're thinking about what they're doing. Get used to staring at the person. And a lot of players have anxiety about this. They have anxiety about looking at other players at the table, which is something I'll talk about later. But for now, if you watch this video, any takeaway I want you to have is just add more attention and awareness to your game. I think that's the first step. And then you can learn how to, do all the crazy high level stuff I teach in Beyond Tells. But for now, just pay attention to behavior. It's so critical. That's about it. Sorry for my rant. I'm going to be ranting a lot on these things because I get really fired up when it comes to the value of behavior at the table. I will convince every single one of you that behavior has massive value. And that's about it. If you haven't already, beyondtells.com/training, click the free training below. It's the first week of the Beyond Tells training. I get into the mechanics behind this stuff at length. You get the opportunity to see how good you are at identifying tells and do a bunch more. So anything else, comment, post below. Thanks for watching. A lot of poker tell stuff coming.